Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to what is my first YouTube. But I also want to acknowledge that I'm here in Darwin and I'm on Larrakia land, which is the name of the Aboriginal people or the traditional owners that have lived here for millennia. But this YouTube has come about because I've been on quite an arduous journey in the last few months. I've written a book on trauma and trauma recovery because I'm a trauma therapist. But what's happened is I've also become a publisher, and then set up a website. And it is that part of the journey that I want to talk to you about today, because it's given me a whole new insight onto the struggle that it takes and the challenges it is for both the person, the trauma survivor, and for the prospective counsellor, in terms of how to engage and how to get in to start the therapeutic process. How do you get together? And the story behind that is that my husband is an IT specialist, and so he is used to thinking in IT language and things, and my website producer is used to talking in that sort of language. And so many times, that only a couple of weeks ago, I realised that I actually didn't have a clue what they were talking about. They would say things like, the website's live. So what did I do? I get onto Google and I try to find it, and it's not there. And so what I realised was that they were making assumptions about my capacity to know the language and to understand. And that made me rethink about what happens when when a person wants to come, when we're trying to get the person to come to counselling. So I've drawn up this little bit because I think at that moment it's quite perilous for the person seeking counselling, because they're moving into a whole new world. That's what I've been doing. I've been moving into a whole lot of technological world, even to doing this. I mean, I'm sitting here in my garden. I've chosen to use an expert to help me do this video, because I haven't got a clue how to do it myself, and I want it to be good quality for you. You will hear in the background there are birds in the background and bird song, and you might even hear some of the neighbours, though I have asked them to be quiet. But that's the whole essence, that we can't always control what's happening in the environment, and as we move through the environment, in terms of moving into a counselling process. So as I grappled with this little conundrum of how to do this, and recognising what is it that is the barrier, the potential barrier to survivors moving into counselling and hence into be assisted towards recovery, I've come up with this little picture. And it's pretty tacky, really, because I'm no artist. I've called it Crossing the Bridge to Recovery. On this side, you will see there's this road, and this little bit here is depicted as a swamp. This little bit is huge boulders or something around here. And right here on the precipice of this great ravine is a tired, rather thin, worn-out survivor. And in front of the survivor has a choice to go back and to keep moving in this environment, which is clearly not necessarily an ideal environment, or to find the courage to cross this space, which is in a sense a no man's land. It's a very perilous space, because only only the survivor can go across it. It is pointless, because on the other side you've got the counsellor, and you might notice that the counsellor is a bit more solid and hopefully more grounded. I've got done with big feet, so they're more grounded. But across this ravine, and that's the space between as a survivor, we have to ask for help, but we have to be prepared to actually cross this ravine. And that's why when as counsellors, we need to recognise that by the time a client or a survivor gets to sit in the chair opposite us, they have had to pluck up a huge amount of courage just to get there. And they've had to traverse some very, very perilous and exhausting routes, and that they may actually, by the time they get there, they may actually be glad they're there, but they may have actually be at their lowest ebb of resources. So we have to recognise that as counsellors. We have to acknowledge, and we're reaching out to them, so that to the survivor. We can't go into the middle because the bridge is not strong enough to hold both of us. We may be able to lean a little bit forward, but it's, in essence, we've got to support, and maybe that it's by calling out and encouraging. We've got to encourage the person to move into that space. This place is not ideal. However, it does have the promise. It doesn't have the guarantee, but it does have the promise that it will lead the survivor into a realm which is a healthier, more wholesome and more enjoyable world. That's our task as counsellors. We can't take away their trauma, we can't, but we can help them to integrate the trauma so that they can begin to live their lives with all their capacity to their fullest amount. In that, we have to recognise that there will be a whole lot of things that may get in the way. The bridge, if there was a storm, something happened. Today, for example, you might see me feeling a bit sweaty. We decided to do this in the garden, but it's hot. So we have to recognise that the environment around us will also shape how we respond, both as survivor and as therapist or counsellor, to the context. And we must be always mindful of that. And together, not each of us, but together, we must work out how we're going to do that in the same way as the photographer sitting over there opposite me. He and I had to work out which was the best way to approach this so we could achieve the best possible outcome. Now that's pretty naive and pretty simplistic, but I think what it does, and it's one of the things that I've realised that through the decades that I've been as a counsellor and as a trauma counsellor, and even in my own trauma therapy and my own trauma recovery journey, I've had to find ways to cross this bridge, because even though we may move further up here, there are potentially even more bridges that we'll have to come across, because it's not guaranteed, and that there will be more challenges. They may not be as deep or as frightening as this, but there are still these sorts of concerns. So I think that's what, as a survivor, we need to recognise that it is a process of engaging with the counsellor, so that we can use the counsellor's resources and knowledge and skills to support us in our journey. We've got to do it ourselves. I could have drawn you walking hand in hand there, but in essence, we still have to walk, but the counsellor is giving us some guidance. I've drawn this little shed here. It's a funny little shed, but with one chair, but I should have put two chairs, but there's a shed so that maybe there are times in the journey where both you as a survivor and you as a counsellor may need to stop and have a rest, and maybe even review how far you've come, how well you did it, and where you need to go to next. Because the path you may have marked out for yourselves when you originally met may not necessarily be the best path forward for the future, for this step of your journey. So I just wanted to use this as a little journey and things, and it's what I've had to work out with my moving into this world of doing videos and trying to provide some sort of moving into the world of technology and social media. That it is a challenging world, but we can do it, and the decision is that we have to take the step here. And that's the bit. So in a sense, each of us have to take the step. The survivor needs to take the step there, but the counsellor needs to take the step to have an understanding of what the survivor, this journey means to the survivor. Not the trauma stuff that we know about, but what does this journey and what is it about this survivor's journey which is significant, and hence how can I apply my skills and knowledge so I can share my skills and knowledge with the survivor. I can't fix the survivor, but I can't even heal the survivor, but I can provide some resources that the survivor can use or choose to use to help him or her on her journey. And I guess that's the substance. And it's interesting that right now we have another thing. We have a helicopter just about to fly over, which is again another thing that we will have things happen in the therapeutic environment which don't necessarily go to plan. And we both, each of us, survivor and therapist, must be prepared to deal with those so that they don't get in the way of the journey. And that's my message for today.